This week, we're looking at a different topic, and we're looking about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about a very important part of our lives, food and drink. And in looking at this, it's important to have an overall idea of what our reality is, because if we get bogged down in the details, it tends to be very onerous and very seems very overwhelming. The first principle to understand is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created all of us. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the earth, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed us on the earth. And within the earth, He has created an environment that allows us to live in peace and harmony and comfort in the earth. So on the earth, He has provided food, He has provided every kind of facility that you need to be successful in that short life that you will be spending on the planet Earth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us guidance in every sphere of our life because He is the one who made us, and we are not capable of really guiding ourselves, of really defining for ourselves. Our intellect and our abilities have been limited. And so mankind doesn't have the ability to chart out for his own self what is a course of action that will be successful in this world. We don't even know what is going to happen in the next 5 minutes. And so we depend on Allah, and Allah has not deserted us. Allah is promised that He will continue to provide guidance for us. So our task is really to find out what this guidance is and to be able to try our best to follow it. That's a successful path. As we receive the guidance from Allah, it is useful within our limited intellect to try to see the wisdom behind some of the instructions. We're able to analyze and to look at the instructions and see how they're beneficial. But there are sometimes we are unable to do so. But whether we are unable to explain the wisdom or not, we have to remain committed to accepting it if we believe in Allah, and we believe that Allah has the best in store for us. So Allah starts off in the Quran. There are many places, and one of it is Allah mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah, Ya ayyuhan nas kulu mimma fil ardi halalan tayyiba wa la tattabi'u khutawati shaitan innahu lakum aduwwun mubin. That, O humanity, and Allah addresses the whole of humanity, because of course all of us have to eat. When it comes to food and drink, whether you're a believer or a disbeliever, it doesn't matter. All of us will have to eat food and drink to survive. You cannot be the person who I saw on YouTube, one of those pastors. I don't know if it's just for entertainment, but he said hot water doesn't burn him, and they threw a bunch of hot water on him, and he was left scrambling. So you never. I've seen also on YouTube where some people say they can drink poison and survive. You know, the reality is Allah has made us with certain weaknesses and certain strengths. And so we have to follow Allah. So Allah addresses mankind because this is an issue concerning the whole of mankind. And He says, eat from whatever is on earth that is lawful and good. And do not follow the footsteps of shaitan. Indeed, he is to you aduwwum mubin, a clear enemy. So this verse has many things initially that Allah is mentioning. First, that Allah says there are things in the earth that is being given to you that you should eat from it, that is lawful and good and recommended, and that the shaitan will try to move you away from that to get involved in eating and drinking things which will be harmful to you. And Allah is alerting us about this. Don't fall a victim to this by getting involved in eating and drinking all kinds of things which are not healthy for you, because shaitan is a clear enemy for the believers and for humanity as a whole. And so Allah gives us this. Now, what our scholars do is that they look at all the hadith and all the ayats from the Quran to glean out from it the principles that we need to follow in relation to food and drink. And so there's 3 categories that we're going to look at tonight. We're going to talk about prohibited foods, And always the prohibited item is smaller. The list of prohibited items is always small compared to the list of permitted items. So permitted foods, the list will be exhaustive. Prohibited foods will be a small list, right? Drinks, few things we are not allowed to drink, but by and large, the halal is always much more than the haram. And so Allah just asks us to keep away from a few things, but by and large, everything is allowed and lawful for us. So we're looking at prohibited foods, foods you should not eat at all. And then part of how you prepare the food, an important part is the slaughtering of the animals, that there are specific rules for that, which shows respect to the animals and give certain care, and also to provide certain hygienic practices. And then thirdly, drinks. What is the poisonous drinks? What are the good drinks? So this, by and large, is what we are looking at tonight. Regard to prohibited foods. So the first category of foods that are prohibited to us is things which died, animals which died not by our hands, that died, what we say, by natural causes, right? So you see an animal dead in the jungle or in the roadside, right? We are prohibited from just picking up that animal and just going home and cook it, And part of the wisdom that our scholars have figured out that why we should not do that is that animal may have died from a disease, and we may catch that disease, or worse yet, get infected with it. So we don't go about willy-nilly picking up dead things and eating it. Number two, it is inherently abhorrent to the human being to just pick up dead things and eat them. It's like not part of our natural nature. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those things which you see out there that are dead by themselves, part of the wisdom of Allah is that those are left for other animals and birds to partake of. It is a source of their food. And then by not allowing us to eat things that just died like that, it is a way of protecting the animals. Because if I have a couple of animals and I know I can just treat them in any way they die just by natural cause, I can still eat them, then there's no protection for the animals. But if I know that my animal that I have, if I don't take care of it and it just died by my neglect, then I am prohibited from eating its meat. That will make it, I will be losing. So that helps me to be more careful in terms of how I relate to that animal. So all these are wisdom. So the first, we do not eat the flesh of dead animals. Animals die in many different ways. How they get killed to reach that state. Sometimes animals get strangled, like they put their head in a piece of a particular tree or something like that, and their neck gets caught and they get suffocated and they may die. They may be beaten to death by someone, or an animal may fall from a high place and die. Or animals may fight and they gore each other with their horns and kill one another. And you may also have situations where an animal partly eat from a next animal and left the remains. All of these, however means they die, we are not allowed to eat from them. Now, if you see an animal injured, then if you're able, there are lots of times, for example, in the rural areas, you will see people with their cow and their sheep walking on the road, and then suddenly a car hits a sheep, and the sheep has not died as yet, but it's dying. If the owner is able to reach the sheep before it dies and slaughter it properly according to the Islamic way, then you are allowed to eat from that sheep. So you will see owners, when they hear an animal has been hit or struck by something, they will try to rush to catch the animal before it dies on its own. If when you reach it, the animal has already died, it's forbidden to you. So you try to catch it whilst it's alive. Now, this rule of dead animals, there are some exceptions. Number one, seafood. We are people in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed us that in the ayah mentioned that the food of the sea is halal for us. So all manner of food coming from the oceans, the rivers is allowed to eat. It doesn't matter if you call it sea dog, sea hog, sea whatever name you give it, as long as it lives in the sea, we are allowed to eat from such animals. And we are allowed to eat from it if we find it dead as well. There are some other additional conditions if you find a dead seafood in the ocean. And locusts. We're allowed also to eat all manner of locusts, whether you find them dead or not. The animals that are dead naturally, we are allowed to use their bones, their skin, their horns, their hair. So if you reach an animal and you see it dead, and it's in a good condition where you can salvage the skin, the bones, the horns, then we are allowed to use those things for, ornaments and decorations and different kinds of things that people do them for. If you have an extreme case where you're very hungry and you don't have access to food, and then you look around, there's nobody giving you food. You look around again and you see somebody has food, but they're not sharing with you. You are legally allowed to go fight that person to get some of that food, because you have to do whatever you can to be able to survive and to prolong life. And so Islam makes an exception, says, if out of necessity you even eat a food which is prohibited normally, because you don't have any other food or any other way to continue your life, you're allowed to take that prohibited food and Allah will forgive you. It doesn't make the action, the prohibited food halal, but Allah will forgive you as long as you take just enough to eat to survive and you don't enjoy eating it. You're doing it out of necessity. So that's really important to understand. So that's the first category broadly of foods that we are not allowed to eat, that they die of these causes. The second rule concerning prohibited foods is blood. That Muslims, we are not allowed to eat blood, to drink blood from animals. Again, this is a protection for animals, because one of the practices that used to happen in the time of the Prophet ﷺ was that people who were very, very hungry, they would go to an animal and they would stick it with a knife. And when the animal bleed, they would catch it in a cup or drink that blood. They're not looking to kill the animal. They're looking just to get some blood from it so that they could quench their thirst. But in doing that, they are being cruel to the animal. And so Islam prohibits us from drinking blood. So in this way, protecting us from wantonly injuring our animals just to get blood from them. And there are people also who fry the blood, and the Guyana and Caribbean, you know, what black pudding and all of this, which people use blood to make different meals and dishes. We're not allowed to do that, right? They allowed blood, which the Prophet mentions in the Hadith. He says spleen and liver, I think it is. That he said these are the two kinds that you can, it's okay for you. But flowing blood, like through the animal, is not allowed. Third category is pork and all its byproducts. We're not allowed to partake in eating pork and swine and so on. Fourth category, animal that has been slaughtered and using other than Allah's name. Allah has given you the animal, Allah has given you the earth, Allah has given you the constitution to be able to enjoy the animal. We don't slaughter it in other than Allah's name. It becomes illegal for us. And it's a way of protecting us from just beginning to, there used to be a lot of animal sacrifice that people of old used to make. They would take an animal and in the name of their god or idol would sacrifice animals. So by making it un-Islamic and haram for us, haram is a word that means unlawful, prohibited. That you can't slaughter in any other than Allah's name, that we are not allowed to do that. We'll learn a little bit more about that coming up. Number 5, when you have a haram product, a haram type of food in medicine. So there are two types of views that among our scholars. Number one, that says medicine is not as critical as food, that food is more important. And so, in this case, that there's a hadith which mentions that Allah does not provide a cure for you in what He has prohibited to you. There's a very authentic hadith that Allah does not place a cure in something that is haram. Something is haram, Allah does not place a cure. So this group of scholars are of the opinion that nothing good that is supposed to cure you can be placed in a medicine. And so they prohibited us to use any food substance that is haram in medicine. Don't drink that medicine. There's another group that says medicine is just as important as food. And then they give their evidence. They quote the hadith by Abdurrahman and Az-Zubayr ibn Awwam, in which the Prophet ﷺ, they had scabies, and then the Prophet allowed them to wear a specific kind of silk as a cure for that. And so they say that this means that you are allowed to use haram stuff in medicine to help cure people, but they have some conditions. Number one, the patient's life must be in danger. Number two, you don't have any alternative medicine that has halal stuff alone inside, and that a Muslim doctor should recommend or approve you taking medicine that has haram stuff inside. So this is the two views that exist. Now, I know many of us, and I'm not going to want to go into a tangent, but one of the big problems we have in medicine is that the thing to preserve medicine, you can use honey, you can use alcohol, but using honey to preserve medicine is not economically viable. It's too expensive. And so a cheap preservative to the medicine a lot of times is alcohol. And so this is where you find a lot of the medications sometimes. The liquid ones, they have alcohol percentage of alcohol inside of them. Makes it problematic for us. But this is the two opinion. Now, there is in many, if you read the few verses of Surah Al-Ma'idah coming down, there's a long description of different kinds of animals, and also that has been mentioned. And so here is a small list of some of the permissible animals and some of the non-permissible animals that we are allowed to eat and not eat. Among the permissible animals are cow, veal, lamb, sheep, goat, turkey, chicken, duck, birds, bison, venison, fish, seafood. Most of the scholars also said you can eat horse as well. Donkey, they said you are not allowed to eat that. Non-permissible animals, mostly those that hunt for their food and that has talons, like birds of prey, carnivorous animals. So these are forbidden for us to eat. Monkey, elephant, fox, dog, cat, tiger, snake, and lizards, and frogs, and lions, and swine, and birds of prey, hawk, and all of those, falcon, and eagle, and bear. These are not, we're not recommended to eat. These are considered non-permissible animals for us to eat. So that's the first category. Then we come to the slaughtering process. So we're going to discuss this in different sections. Number one, seafood, marine animals. Then we're going to talk about land animals, both domesticated and wild. And then we're going to talk about a special situation with the people of the book, who are considered to be the Jews and the Christians. And the Quran is mentioned that we're allowed to eat from the food of the people of the book. So we have to discuss that. And then we have to talk a little bit about some other issues concerning wild animals. So concerning marine animals that live in the water and they can't survive without it, all right? Allah mentioned that He has subjected, and it is He who subjected the sea for you to eat, and from it tender meat, and to extract from it ornaments which you wear. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, He in His mercy has allowed us to be able to eat from the ocean. Now, you may see that as something which you could just trivial, but considering that almost what, 4/5 of the earth is water, right? What a tremendous blessing to make the food of the ocean halal for us. This is a very great mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the ruling is made so simple that because you have thousands of different kinds of species of fishes and creatures and all kinds of ocean animals and food. So Allah made it very easy. He said they're all halal. So you don't have to spend time. I pull up a weird looking creature and says on my fishing line, and says, is this halal or haram? Now we know once it lives completely in the sea, that it's considered halal. Doesn't matter what you call it, what name it is available for you to eat as Muslims. So this is a tremendous mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we must recognize how merciful Allah has been in allowing us to do this one thing. The only exception to that is, of course, if you pick up a fish, a dead fish in the sea, you have to smell it. If it's rotten, if it's spoiled, if it's diseased, you don't just go eating it because it may be floating around these. But if you picked up a fish that does not have one of these, it's not smelling, it's not spoiled, it's not, you don't have to apply any specific slaughtering method as well. However you catch them and they pass away, you're allowed to eat. General rule is when we're dealing with animals, we are supposed to be kind and merciful because Allah has subjugated these creatures to be food for us. And so in taking their lives, they are laying down their lives so that we could get nourishment. And so whenever you are dealing with them, we have to be very, very kind and very merciful in how we operate. The hadith of the Prophet, he mentioned, even when you slaughter, وَإِذَا ذَبَحْتُمْ فَأَحْسِنُوا الذِّبْحَ وَإِذَا قَتَلْتُمْ فَأَحْسِنُوا الْقِتْلَةَ. That whenever you're going to kill the animals, you have to do it well, sharp knife, minimal suffering. Don't kill an animal in front of another animal. There are lots of rules in terms of how to treat the animal properly and kindly. And when you're slaughtering, make sure your knives are sharp so you don't keep rubbing it, torturing the animal because your knife is not sharp. So all of these, even though we're killing the animal, we have to be very mindful. It's a life we're taking with the permission of Allah, and we must be kind and merciful. So with seafood, we have all kinds of seafood that we can eat. The unfortunate thing is that seafood is more expensive these days than anything else. But I guess Muslims are being asked to have rich taste, because you buy seafood, you could spend that money and buy double the other kinds of food. Now, when it comes to animals that live on land, you have the wild animals, right? And the Prophet ﷺ forbid us from eating wild animals with canine teeth and any bird with talons. And we had the list just now of, leopard, wolf, eagle, all kinds of animals, hawk, and we are not allowed to eat those. In terms of domesticated animals, we went through the list just now, goat, sheep, and so on. And then slaughtering, all right? So I mentioned you have to have the knife sharp, you have to be kind to the animals. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned, do you intend to make it die 2 deaths? Why did you not sharpen your knife before laying it down? And Umar al-Khattab chastised a man who dragged a sheep by its feet to be slaughtered. And he said, woe to you, lead it to its death in a kind manner. So there's a consciousness that Muslims need to have when they are dealing with the animals, and not, just willy-nilly, this is going to die any moment, I don't care how I treat it. No. This is a creation and a creature of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the way we are asked to kill the animals is to cut the throat or pierce a hollow in the throat. And if any of you are, what we call the word, squeezy about, listening to some of this stuff, please close your ears. because we're talking about killing an animal, and some people they find that very gorish and difficult to understand. So if you're one of those people in the class, you could just read the notes instead and tune me out. So he has to cut the throat and pierce the hollow in the throat, cut the windpipe, the gullet, and the two jugular veins. The reason why this is done in a very particular way is because by doing it in this way, you allow the blood to drain from the animal before it passes away. If you just chop a chicken head off, the blood gets coagulated inside the chicken. It doesn't bleed out. So you want to be able to slaughter. The Islamic way of slaughtering provides a hygienic meat because it doesn't quite let the animal die right away. There's a certain bleeding that takes place. The animal is not aware of it. And so when the animal is dead, the blood still drains out. And so the meat that you get from it is pretty much very, very clean with the blood not coagulated inside. So you can kill an animal by hand or you can kill by machine. The scholars have allowed both. Lately, there have been lots of argument about hand-cut chicken and whether you can use mechanized something to kill the animals. Always, whenever you have like these two areas of worship and non-worship, and whenever they get mixed into two, we always have this big debate among Muslims. What I mean by that, for example, killing by hand is the way the Prophet ﷺ and the companions they used to do it. And then later on, technology now is introduced, in which we have to find faster ways of killing, right? And whenever technology, which is an area of mu'amalat or non-worship, gets mixed with an area that is worship, you always have this debate. It happened whether you can use watch to find the time of salah, or you have to watch when the sun is shadow. Whether you can use microphone in the masjid or you can't use microphone in worship to give the adhan. Always when you have a technology that comes and gets mixed in with worship issues, we always have this big debate. But from a practical standpoint, to sit and kill by hand is not a practical thing. So there are cases when it is necessary to be able to kill by mechanized technology. Because, for example, Hajj, if you had to sit there and wait for all the animals that people slaughter during Hajj, the Hajj would be over and we're still killing animals. So we have to be able to have mechanized ways of doing things. And in both cases, whatever it is we use, we have to try to get the blood to drain. Now, if the animal is too wild, and you find it very difficult to get to its throat. There are some, I don't know if you've ever been to the slaughterhouse and see, sometimes it takes 8 men to hold on one cow. The animal is strong and it resists. So if after trying, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, a camel bolted away. They couldn't control it. And so he says, if any of them behaves like this, you have to treat it as if it is a wild animal, not a domesticated animal. And so they shot an arrow in it so that it can bleed out for this particular scenario, right? So you want to be able to use mechanized systems to be able to kill it in this particular way. We're not encouraged to there's sometimes one of the practices that they do is they stun the animals. They hit it with a blow or a gun or something to stun it, and then when it collapses unconscious, then you slaughter it. We should, as far as possible, avoid doing that and try our best to find kind ways to do it. Now, at the time of slaughtering, we are asked that we must make dua, because you're taking this life in the name of Allah, with the permission of Allah. And so it is really important that Allah's name be mentioned. As we mentioned before, if you slaughter other than Allah's name, we are not allowed to do that. Now, one of the things that happens is that when you go hunting animals, like you have a trained animal like a dog or a falcon or something, You train them to go hunt other animals for you, right? And so they would go out and they would catch the animal, a rabbit or something, and then they would bring it back to you. So when you set them loose to go out and do that, you have to mention the name of Allah so that when that animal brings it back, then you know you have done that. And the dua is very short that they normally have. Bismillah wallahu akbar. Allahumma minka walak. Allahumma taqabbal minni. In the name of Allah, Allah is the great, O Allah, from you and to you, O Allah, accept it from me. And so you make this dua, which makes it now sanctioned and blessed by Allah, that you slaughtering this animal in that name. The people of the book, let me talk about this. Concerning the people of the book, there are two opinions in regard to if you're allowed to eat their food, and number two, the slaughtering system. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 5, mentioned that lawful to you are the meat, the food of the people of the book, which is considered to be the Jews, Christians and Jews. Now, in our era, and so this was what used to happen in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. But someone came up now and says, in our era, the Christians and the Jews are not the same kind of Christians and Jews that existed in the time of the Prophet. That they have changed their ways. And so the ruling concerning eating from the people of the book has to become more nuanced. Right? And so there are some who are of the opinion that the people of the book are no longer following their religion, especially the Christians. And a lot of people who are supposedly Christians don't practice Christian faith. A lot of them are atheists or they're agnostic. And so they say, we just can't willy-nilly just eat from the people of the book. We have to pry further to find out what is it. So the first group says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, eat to the people of the book. He didn't put any condition of time. He didn't put any condition that the people will change. He didn't put any condition. This is forever until the day of judgment. And so we just eat for the people of the book. That's it. We don't question it. And so a lot of this group, they are mainly sometimes from the Arab world. You know, even developed by culture, but it's not necessarily so. And then you have the other group, which wants to be more cautious and to pry further and to find out further. A lot of people from the Indian subcontinent are of this particular position. And so they said that if we find out that they're not mentioning, because the Christians and the Jews and the Prophet used to mention the name of Allah, before they slaughter. The Jews still have the system called kosher. If they don't mention the name of Allah, then even though they're Christians or Jews, we are not going to eat. Right? And so they pry further to find out how it was, whether the persons who killed these animals mentioned the name of Allah or not. Of course, that's very difficult to gather that kind of information. And the opinion also varies in terms of slaughtering. So you have, again, two opinions. Number one group says that it doesn't matter how you slaughter. Imam Malik, he said, it doesn't matter how they slaughter, as long as they're killing it as per their religion and eating it themselves. These are two important conditions. The Prophet said they have to prepare their food for themselves, not prepare it only for you and they don't eat it. So Imam Malik says, look, as long as they're killing it as per their religion and eating, we don't have to pry, we just eat it. The other group says, no, they have to kill it like us. You see, that it has to be slaughtered. They have to kill it in the same way like us, or else the meat is not good. And this is the majority opinion. That blood has to drain out in order for us to just accept the meat from the people of the book. There's a hadith of Prophet ﷺ, they said to the Prophet, people bring us meat and we do not know whether they have mentioned the name of Allah over it or not. Shall we eat it? And the Prophet said, just say Bismillah and eat it. Right. So each of us, depending upon which camp you belongs to, will make a decision about which position you want to follow. So you will find some Muslims, they eat from McDonald's, they order the burger, and they said it's people of the book, and it's okay. Whereas you will have others that, no, we don't know if it's people of the book. We don't know who killed McDonald's burger, whether it was an atheist or not, and so they would eat. So there's a general principle in Islam, which is da'ma yaribuka ila ma la yaribuk, that you do, if you have a doubt about a particular matter, then you take an action that don't give you doubt. For example, if you doubt the food is not halal, then you have an option not to eat it. But you're not allowed to go out and force that opinion on others. This is your opinion. That you're not, that this food I think is haram. So you don't want to eat, that's fine. But if there's another opinion that is equally viable, then we should not keep imposing our opinion on others. Now that I've confused you a little bit on it, it's one of those things which people debate ad nauseum. Just if you're not comfortable, don't do it. In any case, I think there's a big boycott of McDonald's going on as well for other reasons. Wild animals, slaughtering is not necessary. When it comes to wild animals, we don't have to slaughter them because you can't catch a wild animal to even slaughter. So we're allowed to hunt them, right? One of the things that is very important in Islam is that it is prohibited to hunt animals for fun. We only kill animals for food. It is not a sport to us to go out and hunt. You have somebody trying to shoot a duck, but his gun can kill 20 ducks at the same time. So he goes with a scatter shot and he just shoots the whole herd flying in the sky just to get one duck. We're not allowed to do that. It's killing wild animals, or now we have people who go in and kill animals to get a selfie, so that they could show to the world, look, I don't know what kind of sick mentality we have to be, and that's part of the problem in our society, in which no matter what we have to kill, to maim, to embarrass, to criticize, to condemn, in order for us to feel good and get our kicks on, we don't have any care for what the other person or empathy for the other person. Islam is totally different. So we don't do that. We don't go hunting for fun. So whatever animals you kill, you have to kill just enough to eat, and then you have to stop. And so wild animals, you will make your dua before you shoot, and the weapons. So you can hunt by an animal, sending out an animal. You can hunt by a gun. You can hunt by different weapons and so on. If you shot a game animal, there are lots of details, and you found it later, you have to smell it, and if it smells okay, then you are not allowed to eat it. If you send out your animal to go retrieve the animal that you just shot, the wild animal, like you may shot a rabbit or you may shot something, and you send your dog to go retrieve it, if the dog eats from it, then you are not allowed to eat from that, because that means that dog claimed it for itself, not for you. So you have to train the dog some more or feed them some more. Now, hunting method, they used to use different kinds of weapons, swords, spears, guns. You mention the name of Allah as you're using it, must pierce the animal. Don't just try to kill the animal in one blow, not just beating it with a club or something like that. So Prophet says, throwing stones will not hurt the game or kill an enemy, but it may break a tooth or gouge out an eye. So when you're dealing with this, you have to be careful how you're doing that. And as I said before, we can use different animals to retrieve them. So that is in the terms of the areas of wild animals. Now we come to drinks. And the word khamr, that the Prophet mentioned, every intoxicant is khamr, and every khamr is haram. So anything that intoxicates you, cause you to lose your mind, cause you to deprive you of a sane, logical, intellectual use of your brain, we are not allowed to do that. So khamr is that which intoxicates, is illegal. Because, as I said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought us into this world for a purpose, not just to destroy ourselves. We are not allowed, our life, the Islamic concept is that you don't own your life. Your life is a trust that is given to you by Allah for a period of time to be used according to how Allah wants. So your life is not, hey, it's my life. No. You did not make it. You don't even know how much you have of it. You don't know when it will be taken from you. It is an aman, it is a trust that Allah has given you, blessed you with for a period of time. And since it is a trust from Allah, you have to use it according to how Allah. If somebody gives you a watch and says, keep this watch for me for a period of time, but here's how I want you to do with my watch. Don't put it in water. Don't do this. Don't. So if you are a good steward of that watch, and you want to fulfill that trust which you take on, you have to follow the instructions of the owner of the watch that tells you how to use it, right? Until you give it back. Similarly, our life, that's why we're not allowed to commit suicide. We're not allowed to harm ourselves, So life is very sacred, right? And so the Prophet ﷺ have a beautiful hadith. He says, Kulul Muslim ala Muslim haram, damuhu wa ma'aluhu irdu. The whole of a Muslim to another is unlawful to touch his honor, to touch his blood, to touch his property. We're not allowed to do that. It's sacred. And so anything where it's alcohol and all of that stuff, it's prohibited. And he mentioned what is prohibited in small amount. What is prohibited in a large amount is prohibited in a small amount. The hadith says of that which intoxicates in a large amount, is a small amount is haram. And so we're not allowed to get involved in that. If in our hadith, if a bucket full intoxicates you, a sip of it is haram. So we're not allowed to go near things which causes us to lose our mind. And alcohol, especially khamr, the things which, mostly alcohol is a generic word for wine and all the things that makes you lose your mind. The Prophet ﷺ prohibited 10 different categories. Allah has cursed khamr and has cursed the one who produced it, for whom it is produced, who drinks it, serves it, carry it, whom it is carried, who sells it, earns its money from it, buys it for whom. And why is this so severe? Because this is the gateway for you to do more and more different wrong. Someone may not commit fornication and adultery with another person, but you give them some liquor and you make them drunk enough, they're not only going to commit adultery, they're not only going to curse, they're not only going to steal, they're not only going to kill somebody, they're not only going to go drive and the car going to use to kill a few people. So when you are taking alcohol, it opens the gateway for you to do so many other terrible, dangerous, prohibited things. And that's why it's so severely looked down in Islam. Because you're losing your mind. So we're not allowed to give it as gifts. Now don't even hang around places where people are partying and you're sitting there. Don't do that. Trading in it, the Prophet's a cursed comer and the one who produced it, and so on. A man brought a cask of wine to the Prophet as a gift, and the Prophet had prohibited it. And the man asked, shall I not sell it? The Prophet prohibited from selling it. Shall I not give it to a Jew as a gift? The one who is prohibited is also prohibited for the Jew. The Prophet said, it's not only prohibited for you because you're a Muslim, it's prohibited for all of mankind, right? And then the Prophet, the man said, well, what am I going to do with this? With this wine? The Prophet said, pour it on the ground. And I can relate to this because one year in my job, they gave me this very expensive bottle of wine, and I created so many enemies that day as I slowly went to the kitchen and I began to pour this wine down in the sink. People were scrambling to hold back my hand and says, "What? I've gone crazy. What am I doing? Why didn't I give it to them? I'm so selfish," and all kinds of things. As I watched their faces and I poured that that wine down the sink. So this is one of the drinks that, things like this were not allowed, right? And the alcohol and wine, when a man told a man use wine as medicine, the Prophet says it is not a medicine but a disease. So generally we don't we only drink medicine that has prohibited stuff in it, as we mentioned before. If there's no halal substitute, if your life is in danger and you need to have this medicine, and that a Muslim physician recommends it, that you have to take this or else you're going to die, that's when we are allowed to consume it. Drugs is also included in the word khamar, remarkably enough, because khamar means that which befogs the mind. So it not only refers to alcohol, but it refers to all the other opioids and different kinds of drugs that causes you to lose your mind. There's a lot of debate now among Muslim scholars about marijuana because I think we had mentioned it in another class. So because it has so many healing properties as well. And so there's debate among our scholars as to whether, and there's a long fatwa if you go to the North Islamic Society of North America Fiqh Council. There's actually a fatwa that they give in which they break down. It depends on the kind of things that are in the marijuana. There are some things that they put there, different things, and they have a long discussion on it to explain that. So medical marijuana. We are not allowed to consume any liquid which is harmful, urine, poisons, all the different kind, bleach, and when they had COVID and people were encouraging you to eat horse medicine and to drink bleach and all of this stuff. We're not allowed to consume stuff, liquid stuff that is harmful, known to be harmful to the human being. Smoking also destroys and damages your lungs. And so initially, even though smoking was not existed at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the scholars have, over the years, moved the opinion from being disliked to being haram because it harms them. As we learn more about what smoking does to the individual, it is now being considered haram or illegal to do so. It's like part of harming yourself. And the ayah mentioned, do not kill yourself. Indeed, Allah is ever merciful to you. So Allah makes lawful to you what is good, and Allah decides what is unlawful. Right? So this may seem like a rather tedious and long detail, especially to new Muslims. All these detailed rules that we have to follow. But really, it is just a few things that are prohibited. Like for the drinks, for example, poisons, and alcohol and those, and then the rest of the stuff is all haram. Milk, honey, plants that don't intoxicate you, vegetables, fruits. So you have large amount of choices in terms of what is good. And the area that is prohibited is not because Allah wanted to deprive you of them, but because they're harmful for you, right? And they will cause damage to your body. And we're supposed to try to live as healthy as possible. So you have, all of these different things here. don't drink blood, alcohol, so on. There's a new area which is coming up, which is called plant-based meat, which is a new area of that they're now making meat out of plants, and some of them is also being made from stem cells. So the scholars haven't made a definitive fatwa, but their initial fatwas are if it's plant-based and the plants are not poisonous or injurious, that you're allowed to eat that. The ones with a stem cell is a little more problematic, and so there's still more research being done before they make a definitive fatwa on these particular issues. So hopefully we have some guidelines. One of the beautiful things, and I put some references at the end of my paper today, there are books which has been published by Muslims in which they list all the halal stuff. So if you find it difficult, all you have to do is you acquire one of the books. I have a good friend named Zahiruddin. He wrote both a handbook of halal and haram product, where they list, for example, cheese. They list you all the names of the halal cheese, all the names of the haram cheese. Cereal, they give you all the halal cereal and the haram cereal. Milk, and all the different categories of food. So when you go to the grocery, you can actually see the different companies that has halal and haram. So Muslims have done a lot of work in this. Ahmed Sak, who has passed away, may Allah give him Jannah, has written how you look to the ingredients and how you can figure out for yourself based on the chemicals that is described in the food, how you could become an expert at knowing whether our food is halal or haram. So there's a lot of literature that Muslims have done in terms of this area. And there are organizations also that exist that can give you many information about this if you have issues. So will make it easy for us to be able to do the best we can to try to eat halal and try to live in that way. Lastly, I want to mention there's a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ mentions that there was a man who was traveling and he found himself in a very bad state. And then he began to make dua to Allah. But the response was, you have spent your life eating haram. وَمَشْرَمُهُ haram, وَمَلْبَسُهُ haram, وَغُذِيَ بِالْحَرَامِ. Everything about you was haram. You wore haram, you drink haram, you eat haram. How do you expect Allah now to answer your dua? So when you live a life of haram, getting involved, you break the connection between you and Allah. And now when you find yourself in this desperate situation, the hadith said, how can Allah answer this man's prayer? He has no connection with Allah anymore. His whole life is haram. So what you eat truly can affect your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum.
I have a question here. Someone texted me. They said, do Jews normally mention the name of Allah or their name for God when slaughtering an animal?
They mention the name of God according to their understanding of God, and that was okay. As long as they mention that they slaughter according to their tradition, which is usually the Jews and the Christians, they would mention the name of God. Yeah, unfortunately, you have several situations, right? Remember the general rule. If you're not comfortable with something, don't partake in it. If you're not sure that, but I have seen halal restaurants that sells beer, right? They sell halal products, halal food, and they sell haram food at the same time. So we used to have, for example, a KFC down here, right? The guy would sell halal KFC. You have to pre-order it, and he supposedly have a separate grill in which he prepares, and then you have the ones that prepare, which is his regular KFC. That is, the meat is not killed according to the Islamic way. There's a restaurant in Orlando, Tamari, sells halal food. When you go in there, it's a rum shop. It's basically a liquor place. People are drinking all over the place. You have to pass through them to go and get your halal food. They sell beautiful halal food, but that's the problem with those situations. So that's number one angle. Number two is we have certain agencies. I know Amana down here, in which they certify um, restaurants like Dragon's Delight. If you go there, they have a certification from Amana saying we certify that the meat from this halal restaurant is halal and that the food here is halal. So you also have a national organization that's I think based in Jersey that also do that kind of stuff. So we need to also strengthen that, in which we have major organizations like So for Muslims should have. That's one of the things that you do in terms of certifying restaurants as halal. So if you want to be part of that, then you have to be able to fix your affairs in order. But it is a difficult issue.
Okay.
You go into a restaurant and you're not quite sure, you know. I think we're a little fortunate in South Florida. We have a couple of choices that you could pick and choose. But anytime you're not comfortable, you know, don't partake in it. You know, I didn't quite give you a good answer, but that's basically it's a tough issue in terms of
Right.
you know supervising that. We don't have enough agencies around that has the power to say, hey, if it tells the Muslim community, don't buy food from this guy, it's powerful enough where he suddenly realizes his business is going to collapse unless he conform, you know, or unless he comply with the regulations that the Muslim community have set, you know. So we have to become strong on that front where we certify a restaurant and the Muslims don't go to any other restaurant except which has been certified. So we have to get to that.
Gotcha.
No, it doesn't invalidate the fast. It weakens your iman. It affects your faith, you know, belief in Allah. So you're committing a sin, but the condition for breaking the fast is just to eat. You can actually break the fast with just the intention without even eating anything. You can say, a lot of people don't know this. You drive in your car, don't have any food in the car, time to break fast. You can just say, I intend to break the fast. And that's it. You break the fast without eating anything even. So you're not technically, you don't have to have food to break your fast. It's the niyyah that you have to make. You know, just in the morning, you make niyyah, you don't have to eat suhoor necessarily to start the fast. You can just make the intention and you fast.
Okay, good.
But yeah,
Um,
like smoking and like for example, smoking or doing a haram act while you're fasting, don't really break the fast. It breaks your iman, it affects your iman. It affects your faith and lowers your, you know, belief.
I know some people cooking, they cook with alcohol, saying the alcohol will burn off or evaporate. What is the opinion on cooking with wine or alcohol in your food? Is there enough known that does it
Some of
truly
the scholars
evaporate?
mentioned there's a percentage, I can't remember the amount of, if there's a minimal percentage that is there that don't intoxicate you or whatever it is, that is fine. Because you can't
As long as
technically
it's,
get all of everything out completely.
yeah.
So they make a
So as
leave
long
it.
as there's not enough left to intoxicate you, you're another question. We touched on, and I know you've answered this question before, but I think it's good to revisit it. We talked about being at parties, work parties where
Mhm.
alcohol is present. Um, what about, we have a lot of converts, reverts, people who are new to Islam whose entire family is not Muslim, that they're Christian or, they're different faiths, being at a family event in which alcohol may be present.
Yeah, that's
Um,
always a tough one because you have your family are gathered for Christmas or for Thanksgiving, and you know there's alcohol everywhere. One of the first things you need to do whenever you become a new Muslim, the first struggle is the struggle to educate people about your value system, your new value system, you know, and strive hard to get them to respect that. The only way you can do that is you have to be consistent. You said, look, I've now accepted a new faith. These are my new values. You know, I'm asking you to respect them. And you have to stand up for them. Usually when you stand up, initially people get hostile, but eventually they respect you for it, that you have, you know, your values. So what you have to do is to at least let your family know that you don't drink alcohol, right? And there are people who don't drink alcohol for health reasons, not necessarily for religious reasons. right? So you may have other relatives who don't drink alcohol as well. But you should not use it if there's a very, especially if you're a new convert and you have your own family, you should not use it as a basis to stay away from the gathering. You have to try to go because the social connection and the example of them seeing you is more important. And so you can try as best you can to keep away from the alcohol areas or whatever as much as you can, but you should still go. The scholars have recommended you still go. Don't just keep away completely, even though I know the hadith says don't as a general rule, if you have a hadith, if you have a fatwa from a person in the Middle East, they will say haram, don't even be in the company and so on. But scholars like Dr. Yusuf, Dr. Yasser Qadi, and so on, they take into consideration the reality of where we live. And there are some situations where it's more important to be at the family gathering, despite the alcohol, because there are more benefits to having your presence there than to be considered antisocial and an enemy of the family and all of that. But you've got to continue to articulate your values and educate your family about your values. They're gonna fret and fuss, but the evidence have shown that eventually, because of your higher level lifestyle, your constructiveness, your kindness, your empathy, the way you behave towards them, and eventually they'll come to realize, man, you have become a better person. Islam has made you into a better person than when you were not in Islam. And this is the important thing. So eventually your family actually will turn with favorable eyes towards you because of what you do. You bring gifts, you don't abuse anybody, you don't curse out the family, you don't drink and get on a fool. So your behavior and your etiquette is a powerful tool to really help you along with your struggle with your family. And they begin to realize, I don't know what it is. You should listen to the sister Lisa Prime. She's one of the top Islamic scholars, um, Muslim sister, African American, convert, to hear her conversion story and the struggle she had with her family and how and what happened. They had I can tell it very quickly, they had a large meeting with the whole family and they brought her up, all the cousins, uncle, and they like put her on trial literally. And her grandfather, who was the head of the house, turned to her and says, tell me about what you believe. And she said, I believe in one God. And he says, and then she tell him, I pray 5 times a day. He said, you pray 5 times a day? She said, yes, I do. Grandfather says, we can't tell you anything. None of us pray 5 times a day. From this day on, we will not question your faith. And so by just standing up for her beliefs, and literally her mother put her out of her house. She had to go live with strangers when she accepted Islam at 16. Her mother threw out of the home because they were very religious. And she went and lived till she reached high school, finished high school before her mother bring her back into her house. So yeah, you go through a lot of difficulties, but stand up for your values. And but when it comes to the family, you have to be there to those special gatherings. That's the time you get to show who you are.